I want to thank you all for coming and showing your love for my dad and for my family. I'd like to start out by reading a card my nephew Luke wrote to his grandpa. It says, "Dear Grandpa, you are one of the greatest influences in my life, if not the greatest. You have helped me with so much. You have strengthened my relationship with Jesus and always showed me the way to go. And I know you will keep doing it. I am praying for you so much. In school, we would always talk about influences and modern heroes in our lives, and the first thing that popped in my head was you. I would always be first to answer, and I would say, my grandpa. Then other people answer, and it makes me think about the chances that I would get the best. What are the chances I would get the best grandpa on the face of the planet? You are so awesome, and I love you so much. Love, Luke." Now I'd like to take this moment to tell you a little bit about my dad and what his life stood for in my eyes. My dad was the most sweetest and honest man I've ever known. He was always there for us kids no matter what. He was never short with the I love yous and the hugs. One of the things our dad taught us was the most important things in life aren't things. So he gave us kids the greatest gift a father could give, and that is showing us how to have a close personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And for that alone, we had the pleasure of having the greatest dad on earth. As many of you know, whenever you talk to my dad, he would always talk to you about Jesus. He did it because he loved you. Many times my mom and us kids would have to wait in the car while Dad was in the store, bringing someone to the Lord. One time when my mom and Dad were visiting us in California, we went out to dinner. And as we were waiting in the waiting room, my dad sat across from us and he was sitting next to this lady. And I saw him talking to her, and all of a sudden I saw the tears come down her eyes. And she had 3 small children with her. And the rest of us went in to sit down, and Dad stayed back to talk to her. And I found out later that she just left her husband because he was beating her, and she had 3 small children with her. But now, because of my dad, she knows the Lord, and those 3 kids will be brought up in the Lord also. When you watch that, as a son, there's nothing that impacts your life, nothing as much as that. Now, another moment was while my dad was in the hospital in a lot of pain. You could hear another patient across the hall who was in a lot of pain. And before I knew it, he was praying for that other patient to be healed. My dad was always thinking, about others. My dad would often, pick up hitchhikers and tell them, if you want to ride, you need to listen to me. So by the time they got out of the car, they were a changed person. I asked my dad one time, how long, he would spend praying each day. And he said at least 40 minutes a day. And he told me if the Lord can spend 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, I can at least do that. I remember as a kid many times, my dad, he'd get up at 2 a.m. just to pray and spend time with Jesus. In closing, my dad's final words to me was preach and nourish people in the Lord. So I'm going to try to do the best I can throughout my life. One of my favorite stories that my dad shared with me was about Christmas. He told me, "Why do we celebrate Christmas?" He asked. And I said, "Well, it's because of Jesus' birth." And he said, "That's right." He said it's a birthday celebration. And he told me that the Lord shared with him that you do not celebrate a birthday of someone who has passed away, but of someone who is alive. And that is why. And that is why we celebrate Christmas, is because Jesus is alive. The greatest single thing we can do on earth is to bring someone to Christ. Can you imagine once you are in heaven and someone comes up to you and says, I am here because of you sharing Jesus Christ with me? I believe my dad right now has an endless line of people hugging him in heaven right now. You see, Jesus was as real to my dad as me standing here. So I would like to do something that my dad would want more than anything, and that is to give an open invitation to receive Jesus into your life as your personal Savior. In the Bible, it tells us that God created you to love you, and that nobody will ever love you more than God does. So I'm going to pray and ask you all to bow your heads and close your eyes right now. And if you want to receive Jesus, just speak these words silently in your heart. Dear Jesus, I realize now that I need you in my life, and I am sorry for my sins. I ask you to forgive me, to cleanse my life. I thank you for dying on the cross for me. As much as I know how, I want to follow you from now on. Please come into my life and make me a new person inside. I accept your gift of salvation. Amen. Now I'd like to pray for those who just prayed that prayer. Lord, we know that it says in your word that this life is but a vapor. But I thank you for those who have received the gift of all, the greatest gift of all, and that they have the certainty of going to heaven. Amen. Lastly, I would like to read my dad's favorite Bible verse, which is John 14:1. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. I ask you, what's the one material thing that a son would want to see of his dad after he passes away? And in the last few days, I've been going through my dad's stuff, and he has about a half dozen worn-out Bibles. There's nothing more I could ask for than to see that. And I know what gives me such a peace is that my dad is finally where his soul has been yearning to go, and that is face to face with his best friend, Jesus. There's one more thing that my dad would like to say to each one of you, is to take this life moment by moment, and that Jesus is what it's all about. I love you, Dad.